be having a conversation about detasking, disarming, and abolishing the police, that conversation has to start at the origins of the police. Much like Christina Sharp does in her book, In the Wake, I too share that opinion about the transatlantic slave trade, but I would go a bit further to make the links between the presence of black people on Turtle Island and the punitive structures that are meant to control and surveil our bodies, or what Saidiya Hartman calls the afterlife of slavery. Put very simply, and with a lot of things cut out because we only do have 10 minutes, the idea of the afterlife of slavery is an attempt to justify the total dehumanization and the violence of an institution like chattel slavery. And this is where, as a clinician, as a mental health clinician, I really want to add some perspective. Treating people as objects is one of the most unhuman things that we can do. It is so fundamentally against our evolutionary biology. It's against everything that makes us human. We are social creatures. So to treat another human being as an object requires such a shift in terms of our thinking that it requires the rendering of the black subject not to a status of subhuman, but to a status of non-human. And that's the basis for all of this. You cannot treat people as an object if you consider them still to be a human in some capacity. This institution, policing, as we understand it in the modern day, stems from one specific source, and that is the creation of runaway slave patrols in the American South. So as we understand modern policing today, the institution is directly descended from that, to the point where if you pull out your phones and you Google runaway slave patrol on your phones right now, on Google Images, the first thing that you will see is a little 6-pointed star badge that looks exactly like the badges that you see on sheriff's offices to this day. There is a continuous and ongoing legacy of that, and it served a very specific purpose. It served the purpose of rendering black people as objects and using poor white people as a means to enforce that. That is the role of policing as it exists. Some people might say, well, in Canada, we don't have that same distinction. We're not in the US. First of all, we do. I, again, don't have enough time to go into in-depth what that's all about, but the modern understanding of policing has been exported to all of what we might call Western nations and has been enforced in that same way until this day. I think in the territory that we colonially refer to as Canada, we have to also consider the specificity of the RCMP, force that was specifically created with the goal of dispossessing Indigenous people from their land, with the express goal of maintaining their ongoing genocide. Once the paramilitary role of the police was seen as no longer being needed, once the Indian problem, as our late great what was it, McDonald at that Place du Canada, they had his head ripped off and bounced out? Yeah. The solution to the Indian problem, as he worded it, was resolved, and the police then turned into what they always do, which is maintaining the structures of anti-blackness and anti-indigeneity. Therefore, I think, considering the origins of this movement, we need to consider policing as an institution is therefore inherently black, the reform of which is completely incompatible with social movements which claim to be committed to affirming the value of black life. If we are sitting here and saying that Black Lives Matter, what we need to recognize is that for Black lives to really matter, we need to abolish all of the structures that maintain the subjugation of black people, period. And that includes the police and includes so many other structures. For me, those calls to disarm, detask, defund, and abolish must also be rooted in intersectional black feminist and womanist approaches, because this is where the theory came from. As I paraphrase Angela Davis, when we lift from the margins, we are able to lift everybody up. And I really want to take this moment to contextualize the fight against a generalized culture of anti-blackness is a fight for abolition, because it can't not be. It is the basis. And so if you are committed to talking about defunding the police, you are also committed to affirming the value of black life. And if you're not, I think there's a question that you should be asking yourselves. Je pense à cet égard, et je vais switcher en français parce que je vais switcher en français. Je pense qu'il peut être facile également de se fier sur l'état de droit et sur la théorie lors de nos mouvements abolitionnistes, où on se dit ah bah oui, ben c'est parce que tu peux porter plainte et à telle ou telle affaire, ou c'est pas dans leur droit, tu peux déposer une plainte envers toutes ces instances, ou bien tu peux agir de telle ou telle façon face aux policiers parce que de toute façon, un policier qui t'interpelle, ben il n'y a pas le droit de te demander ton nom ou whatever, ou il a le droit de te le demander et tu peux refuser de lui en donner. La question est bien différente quand tu vis la marginalisation extrême à ce point-là. Donc, on peut bien parler de légitimité de l'officier de faire tel ou tel acte, mais la réalité demeure que pour certaines personnes, cette réalité n'est pas possible. L'exemple que je donne souvent, c'est que quand je suis allé j'ai fait mes études de bac à McGill, malheureusement. Quand je suis allé à McGill, la première chose que j'avais fait, c'était d'aller à la librairie du magasin, la librairie de l'université pour acheter un hoodie, un truc qui sort pour mes clés avec le logo de McGill. J'ai pris ma carte étudiante, j'ai mis ça directement devant mon portefeuille. Et j'étais bien content de porter ce hoodie. Je l'ai porté partout, même si McGill est une institution de merde, hyper oppressive, nommée pour une personne qui a détenu des personnes réduites en esclavage. Mais je l'ai porté parce que je n'avais pas porté un hoodie après la mort de Michael Brown. Et le fait que j'ai eu à considérer cette réalité-là, le fait que j'ai eu à dire ah, ouais, peut-être que je devrais ne pas porter de hoodie pour assurer ma sécurité est une réalité quotidienne pour moi, pour toutes les autres personnes noires que je connais, pour toutes les autres personnes autochtones que je connais, qui ont besoin de se développer des stratégies de résilience et de résistance face à un État qui fait tout dans son possible pour nous prouver qu'ils s'en foutent de nous, en fait. Et pour moi, cette réalité-là, elle est inacceptable. Ce n'est pas une société dans laquelle je veux vivre, et moi, je veux comprendre pourquoi d'autres personnes ici qui se disent abolitionnistes ont décidé de ne pas prendre acte plus tôt. Pourquoi vous décidez de rire en pleine face d'un policier lorsque vous vivez que vous êtes interpellé, alors que ce n'est pas quelque chose qui est possible pour des gens comme moi du tout. Et pourquoi vous avez choisi de faire cette forme d'action au lieu de canaliser ces énergies envers la destruction de ce système. Vous êtes là, ça tombe bien déjà, c'est quand même une bonne étape, mais il reste beaucoup de travail à faire. Puis ce travail-là doit encore une fois être basé dans une approche qui valorise les perspectives noires féministes qui ont toujours été avant-gardistes dans leur compréhension de ces systèmes. On est où là? Évidemment, ça ne veut pas pour autant dire que puisque le système est construit d'une certaine manière, qu'on n'est pas en mesure, qu'on ne sera pas en mesure de rien faire et qu'il faut juste être voué à l'échec, autre que si on est en train de lutter activement pour l'abolition de toutes les instances de police tout de suite. Et je pense pas que c'est une réalité faisable, en fait. Même lorsqu'on écoute les personnes qui se disent abolitionnistes, on comprend que justement il faut des modifications au système existant pour ne pas que le monde tombe dans une situation chaotique. Il faut comprendre également qu'il y a plusieurs personnes qui vivent dans des situations de précarité, de violence, qui sont impliquées dans les mouvements de contestation dans leur communauté, qui voient justement et qui, pour eux, la présence de la police est essentielle à leur communauté. Je ne suis pas d'accord, mais n'empêche qu'on va croiser des gens qui ont cette perspective-là. Puis comment est-ce qu'on va aborder les questions lorsqu'il vient le temps d'avoir des discussions nécessaires pour créer des vraies alternatives? Ce que l'on sait, c'est que notre libération passe par une reconnaissance que la police tire sa légitimité d'un État. Cet État québécois, canadien, fondé sur des territoires autochtones volés, bâti avec le travail forcé des personnes noires et autochtones réduites en esclavage sur ce territoire. Cet État, de sa nature même, est illégitime. Cette existence même, notre présence même sur ces territoires-là, nous force à poser des questions quant à la légitimité de nos systèmes, de nos approches. Moi, je me demande pourquoi est-ce qu'on est en train de faire recours à ces instances. Pour moi, par époque, c'est la meilleure chose à laquelle on pourrait espérer. Pour moi, pour envisager un monde sans police, il faut être réaliste. Pour ce faire, il faut se détourner complètement de ces structures-là qui n'ont jamais été créées avec nos intérêts en tête, puis tourner vers des structures alternatives. Je pense que c'est je pense justement que c'est Philippe Némé-Lombré qui nomme justement, qui avait nommé dans son plus récent texte que abolir, c'est créer. Et moi, j'ai vraiment hâte d'avoir cette discussion avec vous, de savoir et de mieux comprendre comment on va pouvoir créer ce nouveau monde ensemble. Donc, je vous remercie sur ce, puis j'ai hâte pour la suite.
Hello? Okay. Hey everyone, is just like if people understand English, because I can do both, or it's okay if I just do it in English, it'll just roll better, but I can speak French, like. So thank you, Vincent. Just like reflecting on the Angela Davis quote, when you, what is it? I don't want to mess it up, when you...
It's usually we must always attempt to lift as we fall.
Okay. So, but no, the one if we lift, like you uplift us all.
Oh, that was me. That was me paraphrasing. But
Oh, that's you paraphrasing.
I said when we lift from the margins, we're all lifted.
When we lift from the margins, we're all lifted up. Okay, so I'm gonna go on that because it spoke to me and I had a lot of reflections about that. So my name is Jessica Quijano. I am a intervention worker, I guess community intervention worker for the past 20 years. I've worked for a long time in with homelessness, harm reduction, with the male trans-sex worker community as a community outreach worker on the street. Worked in needle exchange, a variety of other jobs, shelters, and so forth. Most recently, I worked at the Native Women's Shelter on a project called the Ishku Project, which is a project to address the number of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, trans, and Two-Spirit in Jojage here. And the project was really that when we'd have an Indigenous woman or girl go missing, I would be the person to take the police report and communicate that with the police, and as well do a lot of follow-up with the police and families and support them in trying to locate the woman. I worked mainly in the area of Milton Park, Cabot Square, a lot with the Inuit community, because those were the women that were going missing. The project started in 2017. I left in 2022 last year. And we had 68 missing cases where 3 of them were found dead, and we still have to this day 1 missing case, Donna Perret, who went missing in 2019, who was someone who was experienced homelessness and was in the sex trade that went missing. So I was the one supporting the family, and as well I was the one who did the missing persons report because people on the street had come to tell me that she was missing, so I went ahead and made the missing persons report, and to this date she's not found. That was not found. So I'm telling you all this because there's a point to it. I'm someone who has been someone who was very happy to start the coalition with other people in the community who've been working for a long time to defund the police, but I'm also someone who's been in meetings and in city meetings, and I'm someone who's voted, went ahead and for surveillance cameras and so forth, culturally sensitive training. I've seen all of those actions being taken place for many, many, many years, and participated with the status quo for many, many years. And this brings me to question where there's been a real shift, not only in the kind of work that I do, but in my consciousness, and really asking myself a lot of questions on how we can evolve this movement after working with such amazing, inspiring human beings that are really, really, you see how the system treats them in such unjust ways, and that there's no way that I always would say if people knew what I was able to witness, people would take action. And then I really am coming back to Angela Davis's quote, because one of the things is that can people actually, they can say they want to defund the police, they want to abolish prisons. We can all agree with on that, especially in these kinds of events. But are we willing as well, not just defund the police, but provide support for people that can do a lot of harm? I've witnessed also people a lot of suffering, but I've also seen themselves harming others, harming people in their community, harming themselves more than anything. dealing with like very complex issues like intergenerational trauma, abuse. Like the majority of the people that I work on the street were from the foster care system, had experience, didn't enter the streets of like violence, like they have been experiencing violence for most of their life. And also seeing them do a lot of harm, like as well to other people, and more vulnerable people than them. Like when I say that, like I worked at a shelter downtown, Maison du Père, which was not a great experience, pretty awful actually. Like we talk about the homelessness industrial complex, like people talk about the prison industrial complex, but there is in homelessness that where we treat people like prisoners because they're living on the street, and we impose a lot of restrictions so that they can't really paternalistic, like infantilisant, like that, and so it makes them not seem like it's dehumanizing, right? Like so it really plays on the person's like self-esteem and their how can they really heal from, like I'm seeing a lot of people need a lot of healing, right? They haven't even had the chance, they're so in survival they can't even heal. So it's like working in places like that where we would have like integration for men who just got out of prison, and most of them were like for sexual abuse of children, and they need to find housing or they need to find employment, and there's a lot of restrictions because they can't be near their park and so forth. And it's like, how do we, and I'm going to tell you like very honestly, like a lot of the personalities are not like exactly the most desirable or enjoyable to talk to. A lot of them are still very much in denial of what the harms they've done. Like there hasn't been any kind of like treatment that they've gone to prison. And are we going to, like, sometimes are we able in this movement to support someone who's done like sometimes extreme harm and maybe harming children, or someone who's been very violent towards their partner? Are we willing to support those peoples? Because that's like fundamentally for me one of the things with my values that I have to question. By supporting this person find housing, or supporting this person get like social assistance, or a just like have like a good quality of life, like to believe that fundamentally, I think it's really important to our movement, because there's so many times what I've witnessed is that people they are willing to support these kinds of events and come to this, but if they're a landlord and their tenant is, let's say, doing drugs, right? And they won't have any problem putting them in situations of homelessness. Like it's just kind of like a little bit, and I could be completely wrong. You could all be very, very, very like open people, but my experience is that that people are willing to sometimes witness those trauma because it makes you reflect on your own privilege. It makes you reflect that how maybe you in the position that whatever position that you are, what is it? It's your class or your race. What responsibility do you have towards that human being? And that's why I think that we have a lot of, like, we could talk about defunding. The police are really a reflection of us, of what it's like. There is this, like, and this is really interesting because I work at Dawson College right now with young Indigenous students, and we were talking about this exact topic, and this 17-year-old told me, he's like, you know what, Jess, I believe what you say, and because it sounds true, but I like living in a delusion of safety. And it really spoke to me. I was like, I've never even thought about that. I like living this delusion that these people, even though I'm an Indigenous man, if I need help, they can actually help me, help me, even though like everything you're saying is true. And so that made me really reflect of how we haven't really provided something we can actually imagine, like outside the system. Like we're so into the system, and Vincent and I were talking about this before, like often the response is like, let's work within the system. We have to, like, whatever it is, go to the city council meeting and do a committee and do that. But the people that this is the police brutality and police violence are the most affecting, are people who are marginalized, who are not accepted within the system. So you're asking, like, it's almost like you're asking people to do stuff within the system that they're not even a part of, that sometimes they're like, I'm not even part of that world. I live in a completely different world. And so that means that what that tells me is that if we're looking only within the system, we're not really like envisioning things in like something that can actually make people inspired to change our society. So I think that we can like discuss. How long do we have?